So here's what I'm looking for with your legs. Your legs are about at 90 degrees, which gives you more freedom to move the pelvis around without having to get the hip flexors really involved. So you might take your feet, a little further away. Perfect. That's great. Okay. The next thing we talked about is your head and your neck. So perfect. It may be even nicer at home to slide a towel or a thin blanket or something under your head. We want your ears to line up so the center of your ear is right over the center of your shoulder and the chin is perpendicular to the mat. And right now you look cozy as can be and really well aligned. So hopefully that's true for you. Okay, so next thing, go ahead and find a pelvic neutral as just for now. We'll talk more about that later, and then we'll get into the breath. So first, we start by just observing the inhalations and the way that they move. We want to sense the movements in the 4 specific areas where the breath moves. Moves into the belly, the lower ribs move out to the sides, and the upper ribs move forward and back. So you're gonna feel it in your belly, the side ribs, the chest, and the back. So just taking a moment now to observe belly, sides of ribs, chest, and back. And if it's helpful, you can do a moment or so to focus on each area and just check in. Sometimes it's also nice to place your hands on an area where you don't feel a lot of movement, just so that you can really sense into and tune into those areas. That's great. So belly is expanding, ribs are moving laterally, which means out to the side, kind of like an accordion. And the chest goes forward and the back goes back. The next important piece of the breath is the exhalation. So like we talked about, Joseph Pilates had his clients blow on a pinwheel or something like a pinwheel. You want to imagine that pinwheel turning at a constant velocity. So the breath is really smooth. Also, you might think of kind of blowing up a balloon, or maybe you are the balloon and you're letting the air out in a constant stream. Okay, so always exhaling through pursed lips because we want to get all that air out. Okay, so muscularly, we engage the pelvic floor, the corset or TVA, and keep exhaling until the bottom ribs close. That's beautiful. Do that again. So inhaling into the belly, the sides of the ribs, the chest, and the back. Exhaling, we want the pelvic floor and TVA to engage at the same time, and then keep exhaling until the ribs close. Keep that going a few more times. So lots of things to focus on here, all those components working together. This is a really important Pilates foundation. Remembering that the abdominals are the connection to the lower ribs. And when we use the abdominals to close the bottom ribs, we're building that neuromuscular connection. So we're teaching the abdominals that we want them to do this when we exhale. We want those ribs to come to a close to push all the air out and to encourage really good posture in the body. Okay, so that looks really nice. Looks like the breathing is going very well. So you can keep that breath going or you can let it go and just come to natural breathing, because we're going to shift our focus to the pelvis. So the pelvis has 2 important positions in Pilates: neutral and imprint. So it's helpful as you're kind of settling in to move the pelvis anteriorly and posteriorly a few times, so you kind of let your body get adjusted. So take a few rounds, anteriorly tilt and posteriorly tilt the pelvis. And always in Pilates, just like in yoga, we're moving mindfully. So really tuning in feeling the movements of the body as you make those movements happen. Really nice. Great. Okay, so neutral is somewhere between anterior and posterior tilt. So see if you can find in between. Good. And just humor me, lift your head a little and tuck your chin a little, just a little. Beautiful. Lovely. Nice neutral. Okay, so back to the pelvis. You are in your neutral pelvis. Things to be aware of about neutral pelvis. First, there is a slight curve of the lower back away from the mat. So there's a little gap between your lower back and the mat. Second, the sacrum, which is the bone at the back of the pelvis, which connects to the spine, is resting on the mat, right? And also, you've got that little triangle, so your hip points where they connect to your pubic bone creates a triangle shape. I like to imagine that's a saucer for a teacup, and that tea is hot, so you want to make sure that that is a really balanced saucer, right? That triangle, in other words, is parallel to the floor, and that should bring you into a neutral pelvis. So taking a moment, breathing into your neutral pelvis and really getting a sense of what that feels like. And then we're going to try the second pelvic position. Don't do it just yet. We'll do it together. So staying in neutral, think about your abdominals like lasagna. Like they have layers. The deepest layer is your corset muscle, your TVA. Then you have 2 layers of obliques, internal and external, and finally the rectus abdominis on top, which is the six-pack muscle. When we bring the pelvis into imprints, we only use the TVA and the internal obliques. So only the deepest 2 layers and no glutes, right? So you'll do a slight, you can do it now when you're ready. You'll do a slight posterior, good, pelvic tilt, good. And then just taking a moment to feel that. So only muscles that are being used are the TVA and the internal obliques. The glutes are relaxed, the rectus abdominis is relaxed, and so are the external obliques. And I know it's hard to sense all those things happening, but just get a sense of this is just the deep core. No superficial muscles are really working to get you into this position. So other trademarks of this position is your lower back is coming towards the mat. It may or may not be touching the mat, and it certainly doesn't have to press all the way down into the mat. So we don't want to really jam the lower back down. Also, your sacrum is still on the mat, right? So if your tailbone is curled way up and your sacrum's lifted, that's too far. So just noticing, can you bring that sacrum on the mat, lower back reaching towards the mat, and you just have the deep layers of the abdominals turned on. That is your imprint position. So taking a moment to connect there, you might try your Pilates breath in that position a few times. So staying imprinted now, breathing into belly, sides of ribs, chest and back, and good. Exhaling, pelvic floor, TVA, and closing the ribs at the bottom. Good. Do that a couple more times. Inhaling. Exhale, purse lips like you're blowing on that pinwheel. Good. All the air out, close the ribs at the very bottom. Good. One more time, and then we're going to add on. Pelvic floor, TVA, good. Keep exhaling, good. Close the ribs. Very nice. Now, you can bring that pelvis back to neutral. So take a moment to find that neutral. And we're going to synchronize moving with the breath. So take a breath here and prepare. Inhale into all the areas. Exhale through pursed lips. And we're going to start our pattern next. So staying in neutral, take a breath in, big Pilates breath in. Exhale, imprint the pelvis, just the deep core. You're going to stay imprinted when you breathe in. And then exhale, keep the abdominals eccentrically engaged as you bring that pelvis to neutral. Pelvis to neutral, but the abs stay turned on. So in neutral, breathe in. Exhale, imprint the pelvis. Good. And then you'll stay and breathe in. And then you'll exhale, return that pelvis to neutral, keeping the abdominals engaged. Good. One more time. Inhale in your neutral. Exhale, imprint the pelvis. Very nice. Stay, breathe in. Pilates breath. And then as you exhale, keep the abdominals engaged as you gently and mindfully bring the pelvis back to neutral. You're going to stay and just take a breath. Get all the air out. Make sure you let those abdominals close the ribs at the end. Good. And you can do that pattern as many more times as you like. Just the breath or the breath with the movement of the pelvis. And you're done. Great job, Taylor.
Thanks.